Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Senator Witkos' Veterans Corner. Today I'm in the great city of Torrington, and I am in the home of retired Staff Sergeant Ralph Murphy, United States Army. Ralph, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
And you're 95 years young today,
yes,
or
I am,
this year, right?
Oh, not this year.
This year. Well, fantastic.
Good.
It's a pleasure meeting you and an honor, and thank you for your service to our country.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
So what I like to do is I like to have our guests talk a little bit about their background, of what war you served on. So I understand you were a serviceman in World War II.
Yes.
Correct? So what was going on at the time of the country where you got drafted?
Well, you know, the draft bill became effective in November 1940, and there was a provision in the law that permitted me to complete my academic year at Fordham, got my undergraduate degree, and but the birthday was on the 24th of July, and the first day of August I got the letter, welcome you, a visit from, the letter from the President of the United States.
And, they say that government works slowly, but I guess in your case it only took 1 month. It was pretty quick.
Then I got wound up at Camp Upton out on Long Island, and from there I was assigned to a new regiment set up in North Carolina, 196 Coast Artillery, and the sidelines were anti-aircraft.
Did you get to sign up? Now, once you got drafted and you went down and did your basic training, did you get the chance to pick what field you wanted to serve in, or they said, no, you're doing anti-aircraft?
I was directly inducted in that regiment, 196, at Camp Upton.
Okay.
And we went down that the camp, I can't think of the name of the camp, Camp Davis.
Yep.
It was a brand new setup, and there were 5 new regiments. Everything was brand new, and I wound up in the 196.
So you didn't get a chance to choose. You were told.
I did good. And we had the old 30 millimeter anti-aircraft guns.
Okay.
And that was the time everybody was out singing "Over the Hill in Ohio." Remember that? And on the night before the Pearl Harbor Day was a Sunday, and I was guard duty that night. And the rule was you got half the day off the next day to relax. So that was a Sunday, and I had missed going to Mass, and I decided to go down to the main PX, they had good breakfast, And halfway down there, I heard, very loud, say, all personnel return to your barracks. The Japanese have bombed Pearl Harbor,
And that was over the PA system
in the camp.
Base in North Carolina, you said?
North Carolina. So the place, and I had already had a reservation to go home for Christmas.
Okay.
And when I got back from the Christmas vacation, I got a call by the captain of the battery to pack up my goods, saving just the suit you're wearing and a second pair, and you're going up to Fort Monroe in Virginia, and I was the head of the Coast Artillery up there in the school. And I learned a lot about gunnery and guns and all that sort of stuff. And I was the only college man in the group. I don't know what made a difference. And I used to, at nighttime, artillery, big stuff, was a lot of trigonometry, a lot of...
Sure.
And I thought I came out first in the class. Then they have the graduation, and going in the fancy uniform and going up, and I get pulled away. Sorry, sir, your order's been changed. You're going out to San Francisco. I got no reason why. And I had 2 weeks to get home, I guess, and I also had the ticket transportation at Grand Central. And the train was leaving at midnight, 12 o'clock, and it's the 20th Century Limited, the famous, and the red carpet.
Yeah.
And everybody's on the car, and I'm the last passenger going down the red carpet. And I can see my father and mother up with, and one of the porters comes out and brings me in a beautiful stateroom. And I had to travel first class all the way out to San Francisco.
See, you were the top of your class then, if you...
But just me, booked private at the time. And I wind up at the railroad station in San Francisco, and there's 2 MPs there looking for me. And they take me up, put me in a Jeep. The ferry going to Alcatraz ferry. There's another island out there, Angel Island. In the old days, it was the Ellis Islands of the west coast.
Okay.
And 3 days after that, I get called to line up to somebody else. Put me back on the ferry back to the railroad in San Francisco. Didn't go from San Francisco to Los Angeles, not first class.
Did you know what your final destination was going to be?
No, I have no
ever
idea
at all,
what
or
it-
it was just going from point to point to point?
Just I got to Los Angeles. The MPs are waiting for me. They bring me down to San Pedro, is the port of Los Angeles, and there's a ship lined up there, the Liberty ship, the SS Thomas McDonough. The deck level was loaded, and the gangplank is there, and the crew is hanging out watching it. And I'm going up, and as soon as I hit the deck, the gangplank goes up. And there are 2 or 3 other GIs there, and I just met, and the lieutenant, an Air Force lieutenant, the ship takes off.
They're holding the ship for you.
It wasn't for
apparently.
me, yeah. And we got an hour on the ship. They called the lieutenant in and had an argument with the crew. Said they're going to strike, or those lazy GIs are not doing anything. So we wound up standing the watch at night, and we had to.
Were the guns that you were trained on the same on the ship as they were on the land?
Well, I didn't handle the guns on the ship. I was just. My orders were to sit on a chair in front of one of the cabins. They gave me a .45 pistol and 3 hand grenades. And my orders were, if the ship was to be boarded or something, I was to blow out the 45, the locks, and throw the hand grenades and blow the place to hell.
Blow your own ship up?
Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't know what was happening. And one day I got the dog watch. And it was fascinating for a young boy from the Bronx sitting on the bridge with just the first officer and the helmsman, pitch dark, and the guy up in the crow's nest.
Right.
And they had a Navy observer in the back watching things,
So where did your ship sail to?
We wound up, the first port we pulled in was Tahiti. And remember the motion picture, Tales of South Pacific, where they came out with it?
Right.
They did that, But the captain was a wise guy. The ship said, there'll be liberty, but no boats. But the lieutenant went ashore, and he came back, and apparently it changed the orders. Because the next thing I wound up in Wellington, New Zealand. And we stayed there a day, and it changed. And eventually I wound up in Melbourne, Australia, with unloaded the ship, and there were 3 of us, 4 LGIs sitting. Nobody knew we were coming. Finally, Aussie MP or somebody came up and brought us into the commanding general or somebody in the docks, and we wound up. Apparently there was a shortage of officers at the time down there, especially on materials and responsibility, and they called us in for interviews. And you're a good man. You're an artilleryman. We need you. You can't go up. So I got a train. And in those days, Australia, each of the areas had different gauges on the railroad.
Right.
So I went from Melbourne to Australia. Adelaide had to change. And Adelaide, they meet me again.
So how you left in January of 1941 to head, for the most part, from North Carolina out to California.
Well, no, it was in August of 41, so I actually got it,
Okay.
And I wound up in Darwin, Australia.
And how long was that, the whole time that they kept moving you around either by ship or by rail? Over a couple of years?
No, months.
Oh, just a couple of months?
Yeah. I got to one place, I'll be there for a couple of days, and I changed my orders again here and kept going. Later on, I'll tell you what the story was, because I could look at my service record. So they wound up at Adelaide Springs, up in the middle of Australia, and they changed the planes. And my brother was in the Air Force, an engineer in the air. He used to call them the wind-up airplanes.
Okay.
The little, and wound up in Port Darwin, up on the top of Australia.
Was your brother in the service at the same time as you?
No, he had the presidential department.
Okay.
And what we set up 50 caliber air-cooled 50 caliber machine guns on the airstrip was nothing but just the road through the desert.
Now how did your brother get a preferential deferment?
Well, that's another story. It'll take you hours to tell. But he was a genius, and he was in high school, and he was promised a well, go to Manhattan to get a degree in engineering. And my mother's family, the Irish, were very prominent in Democratic politics, and apparently they got him an appointment to go to the Naval Academy.
Wow.
But they revoked it. So he worked for a little airplane company in Brooklyn on a Brewster aircraft, and they put him in a tool shed. Mm-hmm. And one day they found him making corrections on the drawings. So they finally sent him up to the engineering department. They didn't like the idea to and somehow or other, that's another long story, but he had a reference to Igor Sikorsky
okay, all right.
at Chance
So he had to have been pretty high up there to get a
he was just
preferential deferment. Somebody knew somebody or wanted his work to remain, so he's not.
No, how it happened, one of my uncles, Martin McCarthy, was a guy from one of the original good IRA boys.
Yeah, okay.
Big, tall Irishman. And he developed a very successful firm importing French laces.
All right.
And one day he was delivering something. Mrs. Sikorsky happened to be the customer. And
we know that name in Connecticut very well.
So he said, "Oh, that sounds interesting." He's talking about my brother, and he must go see Igor. So he made a date to go see Igor, but he found up in the wrong personnel office. He wound up in transport.
So how did you get back? At what point did they say your tour's over and you're coming back to the United States? Where were you when you got that word?
I was back in a place called Milne Bay on the end of Australia, New Guinea, and they were getting ready to go up to the Philippines.
Okay.
And the unit was ready to get aboard the freighters, and in Australia in those days the topography of the land was so it was flat. The ships used to come right into the.
Is this after or right around the time that the Japanese had taken the Philippine Islands?
Oh, this way in toward the end of the war.
Towards the end of the okay.
So I got a call from the captain, who, by the way, was a fellow from Georgia Tech, and his famous expression was, "As Pierre has shown, a graduate of Georgia Tech, but a hell of an engineer." And he showed me two radiograms they had. The first one was appointing me a captain in the Army of the United States. I said, "Why is that?" He said, "They're forming a new regiment, sir, and I want you as my adjutant." Then he said, "You better read the second one." The second one said I was ordered to return to the United States in rotation. That must be about 3.5 years.
Oh, okay.
And I came aboard the SS Thomas Mann. Admiral Mann was a hospital ship. And there were just a few of us walking wounded. And we were down on the lower decks and the hammocks. Terrible, right?
You didn't like ship life?
Oh, so one of the old fellows, an old regular Army sergeant, he said, "Hey, Murph, let's get out of here." We were up, and we used to sleep on the deck at night.
You were allowed to do that? I didn't think they would allow you to do that.
Yeah, okay. So while looking at the stars, it was wonderful. Sure. And all of a sudden, about maybe a week and a half on the ship, I look, "Hey, there's a star, there's blinking out, the blinking star." That's not, it's an aircraft. And the pilots were talking to the ship, the hospital ship, and there's a signal. And they figured we were near Hawaii or San Francisco or California. A couple of days later, the fog is terrible, and the ship stops, and you can hear the bells going ding, dong, ding. And the sergeant major on the Marine on the hospital ship detail comes up to me, a lanyard, and ties one of it on the end with a big pipe, and he hands me the other end and says, "Sergeant, you hold that back so when the fog breaks and the crew runs to get the lines and stuff, they won't, So the fog broke like that, and some of these fellows are men that had worse experience than I had.
Sure.
Glad to get home. And the rope, somehow the rope fell out of my hand. And they said, we got into the same pier I left from, was the Batson Line pier, and up on the roof was a spar band, a gal playing "California, Here I Come," right back where I started from. Oh, it was wonderful.
Yeah, what a welcome home, huh?
Yeah.
So now what did you do once you got out of the military? You got an honorable discharge.
Yeah.
And then you went into, what did you do then?
Well, before I before the war, the last year at Fordham, I applied for law school.
Okay.
I never heard anything from it. And one day, about 2 or 3, maybe 3 years later, I got a note from my mother saying she had heard from the law school that I was admitted. So I went to start at the law school evening in Fordham. And my father had a restaurant down near Gramercy Park, and there's one of the appellate division courts there. And the clerks and judges used to have their lunch in my father's back room. Great Irishman. And they heard that I was going to law school, and I got a reference to 2 people to talk to. I went to the first one, and I was to meet a Mr. Roosevelt. Up in the areas around 4th Avenue, they call the factors, all these types of importers. And I'm sitting there, and the door opens up, and here comes Mr. Roosevelt. But it ain't Mr. Roosevelt, it's a bird colonel with the most brass, and you sink a battleship.
Oh.
And I was in there, interviewed. They were starting an in-house counsel, and he's a clerk. And they accepted me. But I said, gee, I have another name to, I think it over to my father, looked down there. And the gentleman who was interviewing me was Wesley Groves.
Yeah.
Remember the name?
No.
The head of the Manhattan Project, General Groves.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah. Well, I'm aware of the Manhattan Project, but the names escape me a little bit. Now, I understand, obviously, you graduated.
So then I went down to the next, I said, I had to at least go talk to the other firm that my father referred me to. And I go down to 44 Wall Street, and I'm looking on the get the room number. You know, and all these big buildings all had Irishmen, the starters for the elevators, and they're all millionaires. Cause the guy he said, what are you looking for, Sonny? I'm looking at the Stanwood Bank, and he blows his little whistle, and the door opens up to an elevator. Got in up to the Wall Street Club.
Wow. And I understand that you graduated and went on to become a U.S. Assistant Attorney?
A state assistant attorney.
State
Anyway,
assistant
this
attorney.
firm was S. Stanwood Mencken. And one of his predecessors was the old Hyman Simon, so the little Jewish banker that financed the American Revolution.
Okay.
And he represented all the great colonial families in New York. The Van Cortlandts, the Rogers and Hamiltons and all those people.
Well, you know, they might have represented that, but you represented, I understand, the American people. Did you not participate in a case before the United States Supreme Court
Oh yes.
in your role as a state's attorney?
Yes, assistant state attorney. I was a senior assistant state attorney.
And what was that case that you dealt with?
Well, it was there's a provision in the federal law called the Army Special Service Act that protected service people that couldn't foreclose and things of that sort while they were in the service. And it turns out that one of the members of the high command at the school up where they make the atomic submarines, he purchased a yacht in Florida or someplace, and he brought it up to Connecticut and would not pay the property tax or the use tax. So they assessed him, and they made an appeal, and he had so many days to argue. And I got a call one day from Washington, and it turned out to be Admiral Rickover, the head of the Atomic Energy Committee, and he demanded I revoke the assessment. I said, I can't do that. And he says to me, young man, who you talking to? I was Admiral Rickover, the 5-star admiral. I said, I was a 5-star assistant attorney general.
Well, you know, it's not too often you get to meet people that have been involved in a case before the United States Supreme Court.
We took the argument, the district court, we lost it. The Second Circuit, I had to recuse myself because one of the lawyers on the bench was a friend of mine from college. And we lost it in the Second Circuit, took the appeal to the United States Supreme Court. And in their papers, the government admitted that the courts were lower in error. What we had since the court had to accept it because the state was a party and there's a federal lawyer involved.
So then your side prevailed.
Oh yeah, the states prevailed, and I didn't. At that time, I was busy with other matters, and the man I succeeded in this office was involved in this situation initially. And he was a JAG officer in the Navy, and we call him a deep water sailor. And the Attorney General at the time was Harold Mulvey, and he was also a deep water sailor, and I was just a staff sergeant. So they took, but I was still responsible for the case. My name appears on the record as United States, the state of Connecticut, by Attorney General.
That's wonderful. And you showed me that document.
Yeah.
So
my name is on it, and there's a whole page full of amicus curiae, other people that agree with either the state or the defendant.
So if somebody wants to read about that case, that I'm sure that case is archived somewhere.
Oh yeah, at the moment I think it's in.
I'm sure it's in the Library of Congress or in the Library of the United States Supreme Court. They must have something like that.
Oh yes, it's published. I have the record upstairs.
Well, that's fantastic. So, you know, a lot of the people that are serving in our military today and maybe tomorrow, and the school children, have the opportunity, because everybody's technologically savvy nowadays. It's easy to click on the web, and they visit my webpage and they watch these interviews. And if you had the opportunity to share a message with somebody that's serving in the military now, the men and women, no matter what branch it is, or thinking about it, what message would you like to say and share with those folks?
Well, I always felt it was an honor to do that. I met many of my classmates that were officers and so forth, and I think I owed it to the country that gave me my education, and my folks came over from Ireland first class, and I was always proud to be a Yankee, and, you know, in the baseball and in the Yankee Doodle frame.
Good for you. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for watching today's interview with retired Staff Sergeant Ralph Murphy. Tune in next month for the next edition of Senator Witkos' Veterans Corner. Thank you, Ralph.
Oh, I
appreciate it.
I hope it's on.